Welcome to the Academy, a series focused on the basics of Star Wars: The Old Republic. Gearing up at level 80 in Star Wars: The Old Republic is entirely focused on what type of content you want to run and what type of content you are skilled enough to run. In this guide, we'll be going over what types of content you can do to get level 80 gear, what gearing paths exist, and some general tips about how the system works. This is not going to be a guide about how to gear up fast. This is going to explain how all the mechanics of the gearing system in 7.0 work. If you're looking for a short and sweet guide about gearing up, or the fast ways to gear up if you're prepping for Nightmare Mode raiding, check out my other videos. Let's start with talking about what is the best gear at level 80 in the entire game. The main thing to know about the level 80 gearing system is that the best gear is locked behind the hardest types of content in the game. So rather than shooting for the best gear in the entire game, you should be aiming to eventually get the best type of gear available for the type of content that you are aiming to play. For example, if you don't plan to run or are not skilled enough to run any Master Mode bosses in Operations, the hardest content in the game, you won't be able to earn the best gear in the game. But you also shouldn't need it, so you shouldn't be worrying too much about trying to earn it. Instead, you might focus on one of the other paths. For example, there's a pure solo path, as well as paths for different types of flashpoints, PvP, and the easier types of operations. Gear in this expansion is split up in two different ways: by item rating, that's the number, and by color quality. If you have two items that are the same item rating, but one is green and one is blue, the blue item will have a better distribution of its stats, which makes it the better item to equip. For example, if you have a green piece of damage gear and a purple piece of damage gear with the same item rating, the green item will put more of its stats into endurance. But since you're a damage player, you want to hit harder, not have more health. At the launch of 7.0, the gearing system starts at item rating 316 and has a max of item rating 330. If you're a pure solo player who does not plan on playing any group flashpoints, operations, or PvP or Galactic Starfighter, none of that, the best gear you can get is green with an item rating of 326 through the Conquest path. If you play veteran flashpoints, you can get up to 324 greens, which, yes, is less than you can get playing solo through Conquest. And if you run Master Mode flashpoints, the best you can get is 326 blues, which is actually the same best level as you can get from running veteran mode operations. If you're gunning for purple gear and the top item ratings of 328 and 330, you'll need to run Master Mode operations at least a little bit. Lastly, if you're playing PvP or Galactic Starfighter, you can make your way up to 326 purple gear. With that said, especially in the earlier item ratings, you can use the easier tracks to help you gear up through the harder tracks, as all the group activity track gear boxes will give you upgrades based on your currently equipped gear's item rating. So you could go pick up a set of 320 Conquest gear fairly easily, and that will help you skip the first few tiers of the Flashpoint track, Operations track, and PvP track as you're working up towards the higher tiers of gear, specifically from those tracks that have a better item rating and color quality. However, to upgrade gear directly, you will need gear and currency from that specific path. You can't directly upgrade gear from one path at another's vendor. What exact path you want to follow is up to you, as it depends on what type of content you like to play and whether you like to play multiple types of content or just one. So on the screen right now is a basic kind of example showing how you can use gear from other tracks to progress faster in a different track. You can side grade to a different color, or you can upgrade using the boxes from that path. I tried to make a chart showing how you could really take advantage of your progress on one track to further move up another, but oh my gosh, there is a lot of options when it comes to moving up the tracks. You are not stuck in one lane. So if you like to do different types of content, it is not going to be a huge problem in this expansion. You can absolutely leverage your progress in one track in the other tracks. The very first step to gearing at level 80 is as soon as you hit level 80, doesn't matter what type of content you like to play, you're going to go start working on your legendary implants. If you want to know more, I have those entirely covered in a separate video about legendary implants. These implants are the best gear in the entire game for your implants, and they also offer your set bonus. If you're a solo player and you do not want to play with others at all, like nothing, you will only have the Conquest gearing path available to you when it comes to gearing up your characters at level 80. For players who are seeking to gear up for group content, gearing up to the final phase of the Conquest gearing path can also give you a leg up on the other gearing paths like PvP or Master Mode Flashpoints or harder operation modes. The first set of gear you can buy from the Conquest vendor is green item rating 320 gear. To get a full starter set of Conquest gear, you'll need exactly 200 Medals of Commendation and a little over 250,000 credits. Medals of Commendation are a type of currency which can be earned through a variety of ways, but the main way is by completing Conquest each week. When you complete Conquest by completing activities of your choice listed in the objectives area of the Conquest panel, then you'll get 200 of the Medals of Commendation currency as a reward for earning 100,000 Conquest points on your character. You can do this on up to 5 characters a week for a total of 1,000 Medals of Commendation per week, so getting this currency is pretty easy. You can see how many Medals of Commendation you have by clicking the currency tab at the top of your inventory. Once you've completed Conquest for the first time on a level 80 character, you'll have enough Medals of Commendation, and you can take those to the supplies section of the fleet, and you're looking for the Conquest vendor who is in a corner room with some other gear vendors. After you get your first set of Conquest gear, you can upgrade it piece by piece at the Conquest Gear Upgrades vendor. Upgrading beyond 320 green gear is a lot more expensive than purchasing your first set, as each upgrade will cost the original gear piece 15 to 25 Medals of Commendation, even more credits, and the hardest part, a large pile of Aquatic resource matrices. Aquatic resource matrix are a type of currency that you can earn mainly through running dailies, heroics, and you can also get a few through uprisings, PvP, and the world bosses. You can get 25 Aquatic resource matrix from a daily area, plus about 15 from each individual planet. So you'll need to run a full daily area multiple times just to be able to save up enough Aquatic resource matrices to upgrade a single piece of gear. You can also keep upgrading your green Conquest gear from 320 to 322 to 324 and finally to 326. But the numbers of Aquatic resource matrices you will need goes up each time. The first upgrade to 322 costs 60, then later it costs 70, then lastly it costs 80 per piece to upgrade. If you were to gear up through the solo Conquest track, not including your legendary implants, it would cost you about 2,500 Aquatic resource matrices, or about 72 planets worth of daily weeklies. Once you've eventually reached 326 green Conquest gear, if you don't plan on doing group content, you've reached the end of the track until the next update to gear in the game. If you're looking to gear up a second character, I've got some great news, especially for solo players. In addition to the gear that you buy and upgrade from the Conquest vendor, you can also get gear from the Noble Decurion distribution chest box that you get from completing the weekly heroic quests and the weekly daily planet quests that are on the solo tab in the activity finder. The catch is that the gear in this box will only ever be the same item rating as a currently equipped piece of gear. You won't get any upgrades from it. This allows you to easily gather up a second or third set for your other characters. All equipment is legacy bound, so you can also put it in your legacy bank and allow your other characters to borrow your gear from your main character. If you want, you can even save those boxes till you have a full 326 green set and then open them for more guaranteed green 326 pieces. As a solo player, you might wind up with extra green gear that you don't need as you play, especially if you're running heroics or dailies. Once you've figured out which pieces you want to upgrade all the way up to 326 and which pieces you want to save or not save for your other characters, the rest of the gear is considered leftovers, and you can deconstruct it to get more currencies. To deconstruct something, have it in your inventory, then click the broken lightsaber icon on the top left of your inventory, then right-click the item you want to deconstruct. After deconstructing, make sure to click the Collect Materials button. Yes, it looks broken. It's working, it just looks funny. Each type of gear will give you a different reward for deconstructing it. Some of the rewards will be currency in your currency tab, some will be materials that go directly into your materials tab, and you often won't ever see any items that enter your inventory. Deconstructing solo gear will give you 3 to 6 tech fragments and 3 medals of commendation for each piece of gear. That's mostly it for the solo path. There are, however, many other tracks that you can choose to enter. Some are more difficult than others, and the most difficult content gives you the best gear in the game. Next up, we're going to talk about group flashpoints. The flashpoint gear track works a bit different. Instead of earning a type of currency and then purchasing your first piece of gear and then upgrading it, you instead get your gear directly from Flashpoint bosses or Flashpoint quest boxes. This is why when you visit the Flashpoint gear upgrades vendor for the first time, they may not want to talk to you at all or have no items for sale, as you can only upgrade gear you've already gotten through Flashpoints. You cannot buy it directly. So you can get gear through Flashpoints in 3 different ways. The first way is straight from the bosses. The gear that drops from Flashpoint bosses will be equal in item rating to pieces you already have. The second way is through a guaranteed upgrade from the weekly quest boxes. The final way is by bringing your Flashpoint gear to the Flashpoint upgrades vendor and paying currency to upgrade it there. Let's start with Veteran Flashpoints. Veteran Flashpoints are the easiest type of group content, as not a lot of skill is needed to pass them for the most part. There's 3 ways to get gear from Veteran Flashpoints. First, the gear that drops from Veteran Flashpoint bosses will be green Elite Decurion gear, and will have the same item rating as a current piece of gear you already have, with a minimum drop of green 320 and a maximum drop of green 324. If you're very lucky, veteran bosses have a small chance of dropping a blue Supreme Decurion item, which you can't normally get from veteran flashpoints. This lucky drop can only be for the earpiece, implants, and relics. If you complete the weekly Veteran Flashpoints quest, which asks you to complete 3 Veteran Flashpoints via the group finder with no flashpoints filtered out, you'll get a special box with a green Elite Decurion guaranteed upgrade determined by the slot you have with the lowest item rating of your equipment, up to item rating 324 green. And lastly, you can upgrade your Elite Decurion Flashpoint gear by bringing your item rating 320 or 322 Flashpoint gear to the Flashpoint upgrades vendor. Upgrading your gear costs the original piece, credits, medals of commendation from Conquest, Aquatic resource matrices from heroics and dailies, or uprisings if you prefer Flashpoint type stuff, and most importantly, a large pile of Decurion Isotope stabilizers, another type of currency, which come from Flashpoint bosses and the weekly Master Mode boxes. If you're just running Veteran Mode, each boss will drop either a piece of gear or 3 to 4 Decurion Isotope stabilizers. In addition to that, deconstructing this green Elite Decurion Flashpoint gear will give you tech fragments plus Decurion Isotope stabilizers. So don't forget to deconstruct stuff you don't need. Now let's talk about Master Mode Flashpoints. Master Mode Flashpoints are on the harder side of things, so players looking to jump into them, especially through the group finder, will want to have first tried out their Veteran Mode counterparts and be comfortable playing their class at level 80, though not a lot of gear is necessarily needed to run them. For players who don't plan on playing harder operations, Master Mode Flashpoints offer the next best gear, and for skilled players who do plan to jump into harder operations, Master Mode Flashpoints are a good starting point for gearing up after picking up a cheap set of 320 green Conquest gear. The gear that drops from Master Flashpoint bosses will be blue Supreme Decurion gear, and will have the same item rating as a current piece of gear you already have on, with a minimum drop of blue 320. And if you complete the weekly Galactic Conflict quest, which asks you to complete 2 Master Flashpoints via the group finder with no flashpoints filtered out, you'll get a special box with a blue Supreme Decurion guaranteed upgrade determined by the slot with the lowest item rating of your equipment, up to item rating 326 blue. So if you already have put on a basic set of 320 Conquest gear, the really cheap set to get, you'll get a guaranteed upgrade up to 322 from that box. Lastly, you can also upgrade your blue Supreme Decurion Flashpoint gear by bringing your item rating 320, 322, or 324 Flashpoint gear to the Flashpoint upgrades vendor. Upgrading your gear costs the original piece, credits, medals of commendation, aquatic resource matrices, and a larger pile of Decurion Isotope stabilizers, which come from Flashpoint bosses and the weekly Master Mode boxes. Deconstructing the blue Flashpoint gear, Supreme Decurion gear, will give you tech fragments and Decurion Isotope stabilizers. Now let's talk about operations. The operations gearing track seems to be very similar to the Flashpoint gearing track. You need to get your first piece directly from an operation, and then you can upgrade it at the vendor. There are 3 tiers of operations gear that you can earn depending on whether you are playing story, veteran, or master mode operations. Gear from story mode operations is pretty lackluster compared to what you can get from literally every other method in the game. The gear that drops from story mode operation bosses will be green Taiwanese gear, and will have the same item rating as a current piece of gear you have, with a minimum drop of green 320 and a maximum of green 322. Operation bosses also have a small lucky chance of dropping a blue implant, relic, or earpiece of the same item rating, which you can't normally get from story operations, for a maximum of 322 blue Kalumi gear for those specific pieces. If you complete a weekly story mode operation quest, which asks you to complete all the bosses in a specific operation, which rotates each week, you'll get a special box with a green Taiwanese guaranteed upgrade determined by the slot with the lowest item rating of your equipment up to item rating 322 green. You can also upgrade your Taiwanese gear by bringing your item rating 320 story operation gear to the operations upgrades vendor. Upgrading your gear for operation costs the original piece, credits, medals of commendation from Conquest, aquatic resource matrices from heroics and dailies, and a large pile of another type of currency called Hazardous matter catalysts, which come from operation bosses and from weekly story mode operation quests, and from deconstructing operation gear. So, I do not recommend upgrading your story mode operation Taiwanese green gear, as it is a waste of currency compared to the other tracks. Just like deconstructing gear from Flashpoints is awesome, deconstructing operation gear is fantastic too. So deconstructing green Taiwanese operation story mode gear will give you 3 to 6 tech fragments and 3 to 9 hazardous matter catalysts. So story mode operations are not a great place to get gear directly, but since you can run them quickly and easily, they are a great way to earn the hazardous matter catalyst currency. You get 20 from the weekly quests, up to 1 to 2 per boss if you get a lucky drop, and a nice pile from deconstructing any gear you get from the bosses or from the guaranteed weekly upgrade box. Now let's talk about veteran mode operations. Gear from veteran mode ops is on par with what you can get from master mode flashpoints. The gear that drops from veteran mode operation bosses will be blue Kalumi gear, and will have the same item rating as a current piece of gear you already have, with a minimum drop of blue 320 and a maximum of blue 326. This is roughly the same as what drops in master mode flashpoints, but where it gets interesting is it also has a small chance of getting lucky and dropping a purple item of the same item rating, which you can't normally get from veteran operations, for a maximum of 326 purple ricotta gear. From what I understand, it's the left side pieces, so the implants, the relics, and earpiece. If you're running veteran mode operations, hopefully you've figured out that implants that drop are pretty useless, so just deconstruct those no matter what they are, because you want to use your legendary implants instead. If you complete a weekly veteran mode operation quest, which asks you to complete all the bosses in a specific operation, once again it rotates each Tuesday, you'll get a special box with a blue Kalumi guaranteed upgrade determined by the slot with the lowest item rating of your equipment, up to item rating 326 blue. And let me repeat that, it looks at the item rating of your gear, not necessarily where it came from. So if you're wearing a full set of 326 gear that you got from playing solo and it's green, the box does not care. It will simply try to upgrade you based on the numbers on your gear. And lastly, you can upgrade your blue Kalumi gear by bringing your item rating 320, 322, or 324 veteran operations gear to the operations upgrades vendor. Upgrading your gear costs the original piece, credits, medals of commendation from Conquest, aquatic resource matrices from heroics and dailies, and a large pile of hazardous matter crystals, which will come from the operation bosses from the weekly, and the veteran mode weekly gives you 65 hazardous matter crystals in the box that you open up. Lastly, if you're looking for more hazardous matter catalysts, Deconstructing Blue Kalumi Gear will give you 3 to 6 tech fragments plus 8 hazardous matter catalysts. Now we're going to talk about Master Mode operations. Gear from Master Mode operations is the best in the game. The gear that drops from Master Mode Ops will be purple Ricotta gear and will have the same item rating as the current piece of gear you have, with a minimum drop of purple 320 and a maximum of purple 330. If you happen to complete the weekly Master Mode operation quest, which asks you to complete all the bosses in a specific operation, rotates every Tuesday, you'll get the special box with a purple Ricotta guaranteed upgrade determined by the slot with the lowest item rating of your equipment up to item rating 330 purple, the best in the game. Very, very few groups can complete a full Master Mode operation right now at the launch of the expansion, so don't worry too much about getting that box. If you happen to get a purple piece of Ricotta gear, possibly from fighting an easier Nightmare Mode boss and just getting a drop, you can bring that piece of purple Ricotta gear to the operations upgrade vendor. All these vendors are in the supply section of the fleet, and you can upgrade that piece all the way up until 330 purple gear. Upgrading your gear costs the original piece, credits, medals of commendation from Conquest, aquatic resource matrices from heroics and dailies, a large pile of hazardous matter catalysts, which you'll hopefully be getting quite a few of if you're running Master Mode operations. You can get a huge pile if you do happen to complete a weekly Master Mode operation quest, as it will award you 175 hazardous matter crystals, but more likely you're going to be getting those hazardous matter crystals from the easier types of operations, story mode and veteran mode. And of course, deconstructing any extra gear from operations. And don't forget, even if you aren't able to run Master Mode bosses or operations, you can still get lucky and get the purple Master Mode drops from Veteran Mode operations and upgrade them over time, so you can get your earpiece as well as your relics and technically your implants, but they're not worth upgrading. The final track is player versus player content. Gearing up through PvP is slightly different, as you can get all your PvP gear from the same track, and the track progresses naturally from green to blue to purple. At the moment, purple PvP gear is about the same as purple gear you could get from operations. You may notice on the chart that the PvP track only goes up to purple 326, but the operation track goes all the way up to purple 330. Luckily, PvP matches have a gear cap, a gear limit on them, so players who jump into PvP with their operations set shouldn't have any advantage over max-geared PvP players wearing full PvP gear. All PvP gear is called Thursian gear and goes from green 316 all the way up to purple 326. Many players are using the PvP track as a faster way to gear up and work towards earning their max item rating 330 gear. You can get PvP gear through multiple different ways. So completing weekly PvP missions will earn you a new type of currency called Thursian Production Accelerants, TPAs. These can be turned in for a base set of 316 PvP gear, and each piece of starter PvP gear costs between 40 to 55 TPAs, earned through PvPing or Galactic Starfighter. Once you have at least one piece of PvP gear, it looks like you can keep upgrading it through the vendors using the TPAs that you earned. Nothing will show up on the upgrades vendor until you have at least one piece of PvP gear from the starter PvP vendor. This vendor is located in the combat section of the fleet, not in the supplies with the other vendors. The upgrade vendor will allow you to upgrade all the way up to 326 purple Thursian PvP gear. You do not get any Thursian production accelerants just for playing. For unranked PvP, you must win 4 matches within the week and complete the weekly to get any Thursian production accelerants at all. You can run the weekly a total of 3 times per character per week. You can also get TPAs from the Galactic Starfighter Weekly, which requires 4 matches played. Completing weekly PvP missions will also earn you a box with a guaranteed upgrade, which requires you to complete the weekly for PvP or GSF, Galactic Starfighter, and you can run that weekly 3 times per character per week. I would definitely recommend picking up the almost free set of 320 Conquest gear before opening any of these upgrade boxes, allowing you to skip past getting 316, 318, and 320 PvP gear and causing you to get a guaranteed piece of 322 Thursian gear when you open up an upgrade box. If you happen to be running any other type of content, for example Flashpoints, and have gotten higher than 320, make sure to keep that on hand when opening PvP boxes too. Now here's where it gets fun, Galactic Starfighter. You can also get Thirstian Production Accelerants, TPAs, and a guaranteed Thirstian PvP gear upgrade from the Galactic Starfighter Weekly, which requires 4 matches played, with wins counting as double. You do not have to win to succeed at this weekly. You can run the GSF Weekly a total of 3 times per character per week. Since the GSF Weekly doesn't require wins, it's a lot easier to gear up through the Galactic Starfighter track for PvP than it is to gear up through normal PvP. Galactic Starfighter is very active right now due to this, and you'll actually see a lot of players who normally don't PvP at all playing Galactic Starfighter. Congratulations, you finally learned about all the different tracks in Star Wars The Old Republic's Legacy of the Sith expansion gearing up for level 80. In addition to all of that, you can also augment your gear, and I have that completely covered in a separate guide as the augments have not changed at the launch of 7.0 from the previously best augments in the game. Lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about min-maxing your gear. Players who want the best of the best will want to work on min-maxing their gear and getting the best stat distribution they can. In this expansion, there are no mods or enhancements at launch, so you must instead mix and match different sets to get the optimal tertiary stat distribution. Players looking to do veteran mode and master mode operations will especially want to focus on getting at least 110% accuracy, even if they don't plan on spending a lot of time min-maxing, as without 110% accuracy you may not even be hitting the bosses. Don't forget, you can use augments to reach that if you need. As actively upgrading your gear at the vendors is quite expensive, if you're upgrading something like ricotta gear, you may want to research first about min-maxing so you're not upgrading the wrong piece. If you want to learn more about min-maxing, I've linked some guides in the description of this video, and of course there's lots of individual theory crafters looking into the numbers, crunching them, and trying to figure out what's best. The Legacy of the Sith expansion has probably brought one of the most complicated gearing systems the game has ever seen. It's a lot more reminiscent of the previous gearing systems in past expansions, but it does have lots of twists and turns to look into. I hope you enjoyed this really in-depth video taking a look at all the different tracks, how they cross-connect, and how all the different currencies work. If you want to show your support for these incredibly in-depth guides about your favorite game, Star Wars The Old Republic, visit Swtorista.com/support. And if you want to have more videos like this show up on your YouTube homepage, subscribe to this channel. As always, may the Force be with you.